The Muslim Apologist, thank you for your super chat. Would you consider Matthew 1:23 to be an accurate interpretation from the Old Testament?
Okay, let me turn there a moment. Matthew 1:23. All right, this will be fun. Matthew 1:23 reads, well, I'll start in verse 22. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So I like to talk about this passage with my students because it's, I think, a great example of a place where if we're not being careful, we'll actually overread the Bible or jump to conclusions about what it's saying. So Matthew is talking in Greek here, at least the text we have is Greek, and he is quoting from Isaiah 7:14. In the Hebrew, the word that is translated virgin in our Bibles is almah, which means a young woman who she could be a virgin or not, she could be married or not, but the point is that she's a young woman. And so where does Matthew get this idea that it's a virgin? Well, if you carefully read Isaiah 7, you find that you're plopped right in the middle of a very gritty historical reality in which King Ahaz is in a politically precarious situation. He has other nations who are coming to attack him, and he's nervous. And God sends the prophet Isaiah to reassure him, you don't need to worry about these other nations. Within a short time, they're going to disappear. You don't need to worry about these nations. And I'll give you a sign that you don't need to worry. The young woman will conceive and bear a son, and he'll be called his name will be called Emmanuel. And before that child grows up enough to know right from wrong, the land of the kings you dread will be laid to waste. So if that prophecy, if that announcement of Isaiah was about Jesus of Nazareth, it would be a very strange message of reassurance. If that's all he was saying is, hey, don't worry, I know you're under attack right now, but just hang on. In 800 years, I'm sending a solution to the problem. That would be not very reassuring to a king. And in fact, the text goes on to say almost immediately that Isaiah went into the prophetess, presumably his wife, and made love to her, and she conceived and bore a son. And that immediate fulfillment of that announcement tells me that for Isaiah, he's speaking about God's reassurance in this historically tricky situation. Now, you could say, based on what I've just said, well, hey, now Matthew's totally misusing Isaiah because he's applying it to a virgin birth 800 years later. But I actually think Matthew is justified in doing so, and here's why. If you continue to read past Isaiah 7 and 8 to chapter 9, it's the same context. Isaiah is still giving words of prophetic words of reassurance and announcements of coming judgment to King Ahaz. We get to the other Christmas verse about the son that will be born, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And I think for Isaiah, it's very clear that he's no longer talking about his son, who was just born as a sign to King Ahaz, that there is coming a son down the road, and that son will be the end, the ultimate end to this destruction and difficulty. And so I think Matthew picks the one verse chapter 7, verse 14, as a signal that he has the whole context in mind. And so he is drawing on the Septuagint translation of Isaiah 7:14, which reads parthenos, which actually is a virgin. So the Hebrew word almah, which means young woman, and the Greek word parthenos, which means virgin, have some significant overlap because many young women are also virgins. So in terms of translation principles, it was an okay choice of a word. And I think Matthew sees this and he's like, ooh, I got it. We are in a situation of great pressure in which Rome is bearing down on us. And God is giving us a sign of reassurance that he will deliver us. And that sign is coming through the birth of a child. And this time it actually is from a virgin. So he takes this verse and uses it not to say this is only and always what that verse meant in Isaiah. Like it was only always about Jesus. No, he's seeing an even greater, fuller fulfillment of the same principles that were at work in the first initial fulfillment. And I think he's justified in doing so because Isaiah himself, by chapter 9, is looking out beyond his own lifetime to see that God will raise up a savior. So my short answer to your question about Matthew 1:23 is yes, I think Matthew is appropriately using Isaiah. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than the average Christian realizes when we're reading these verses at Christmas time.